think that now with this awareness that we aren't necessarily number one has brought on a sense of vigor across the entire ecosystem that people want to go win and fight and be better in tech, be better in manufacturing, accept the fact that we just can't provide the same sort of solution we've had for years. We need to come up with new, better ways to make things, develop things, design things, field things, and allow ourselves to fail.
A quick interruption to remind you to like, subscribe, and rate this podcast so we can get your feedback and know how to make it better. Hey, it's Ari. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Made in America podcast. I am really excited for today's episode. I am a lover of history and manufacturing history in Connecticut. And what better way to be able to talk about manufacturing history in Connecticut than with Capewell, one of the oldest manufacturers, the second oldest defense contractor in all of Connecticut, and my friend, President and CEO, Greg Bloom. Greg, thank you so much for coming on today.
All right, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Well, listen, it's my pleasure, but it's the Made in America podcast, Greg. So we start off with the same two questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
Wow, I should have known that was coming, but appreciate it. So Capewell started off with its roots working with Colt back in the 1880s, producing horseshoe nails for U.S. cavalry. And we sort of leveraged off of our experience with the U.S. government and throughout the 40s and created the first Capewell, which is the Kleenex of parachute releases. Worked with the Air Force, the Army, worked with Chuck Yeager through the years back in the day, developing a parachute or actually canopy release for Chuck and the Air Force. And then today we have bespoke custom airborne delivery systems and soldier life support systems.
Oh, that's a lot, right? All the way from horse nails for the cavalry to helping things fall safely out of C-130s to the ground and a lot of stuff in between. So I'm looking forward to sort of talking about that in the future of Capewell. But before we get into that, Greg, why do you do it?
Well, it's based in our foundation. Mr. Capewell was a big believer in service, as long as a lot of our previous CEOs, service to the customer and the country. We really lean forward and provide hardware and services for the kids that are going downrange, the men and women in service in uniform, providing for our national security in order to give them the best hardware and the best chance to win and come home to their families.
Super important. What an admirable thing to do and a great thing to be a part of. Let's talk a little bit about the personal, Greg. You're new at the job, right? You
Yes, sir.
just took over as president, CEO of Capewell in January of this very year. But this isn't your first foray into manufacturing, not your first foray into aerospace or even defense. Maybe help introduce you to the audience. How did you get into manufacturing to begin with?
It was started off, I began my career on Wall Street like a lot of us did in corporate finance, went to the West Coast and worked for KB Home in finance, and then had the opportunity to go to an aerospace manufacturing company, actually commercial at the time, and it was a business school dream. I mean, even though KB Home manufactured homes, it was a manufacturing house, and then going into actual physical manufacturing was just something that I'd always really, since I read The Goal in business school, I wanted to get into. I was excited about basically creating value, making stuff. It was really pretty exciting.
A lot of people seem to have kind of taken, we've talked to a number of them on this show, that started off in finance, Wall Street or otherwise, and then sort of switched to making something. Do you have any thoughts about that? Like, is there something about sort of being in finance for a long time that sort of makes you yearn to do something more with your hands? Like, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I don't know if it's more for your hands, but not to knock on my finance brethren, but after 10 years of transactions, you say to yourself, man, I really want to add more value. I want to create. And not that the Wall Street game isn't fun and exciting and competitive, but really when you look back and you say, what is the legacy? What have I created? It's not as much as when you actually make something or design something or create a product or a service for a customer.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. When you got into manufacturing and you thought about getting into it, did you think at all about the future of manufacturing in the United States and what the longevity, because for a number of years, people didn't appreciate what was happening in manufacturing, certainly in Connecticut, but I think all over the country, there was kind of an idea that we weren't going to make things anymore. It was just going to be a service economy. Feels like that's been changing, but I don't know if you've had any thoughts about that when you were getting into the game.
So let's go back to the early 2000s. I entered 2001, and at that time, China was really coming forth with low-cost products, et cetera. And the whole manufacturing landscape changed in the United States, whereby if you were just a Me Too, another commodity manufacturer, the value add was significantly less. So as we looked at our manufacturing capabilities and skills, we realized it had to be on the premium side. We had to be able to add significantly more value, higher content, and quite frankly, in products that can't fail in order to compete with that. So I'd say that it was, that change in the early 2000s has led us to even today where advanced manufacturing, cutting edge products is even more important than the actual manufacturing process because cost of capital will still be the determiner where labor goes. But if we can make the most highly critical products that cannot fail, I'd say that's still going to be the future in the United States.
Because you're sort of saying that there's more high value in those products, which then supports maybe a higher cost structure
Absolutely.
that we have here, and that's sort of fundamental economics.
Well, it's fundamental economics, and also in the space that we play, if our products fail, people die. And so the tolerance for, okay, we can allow 3 or 4 defects, which might be coming from a lower cost manufacturer, isn't something that we can play with. It's just too important of a game.
When you got into manufacturing originally after leaving the sort of home construction, although be it in finance, when you left that, was that a conscious thought of saying, hey, I want to be in some of this more higher tech, higher end, higher quality manufacturing? Did that just sort of happen and you learned about it after the fact?
No, I felt that we were it was a small company that I went into, and as I said, it was sort of a business school dream. And you start looking at what's your strategy and how are you going to be able to expand where you don't have the lowest cost of capital. A medium-sized business, we're competing against large companies that had LIBOR plus nothing financing, and says, well, if we're not able to provide a higher level of customer support with better products, we're not going to win. So we really focused on that higher premium product just from a business school case.
Yeah, just sort of taking that business school background, that finance background, and applying it kind of in this space. Now that you've been traveling in the manufacturing space for a while, you've been West Coast, East Coast, Capewell's got offices in Virginia and in Connecticut, and I spent some time in DC. Do you see a lot of the brains from finance that's now being applied to the cost of capital and learning how to do manufacturing in this new world, sort of combining both those skill sets, right? How to leverage capital, but also make something here in this country?
Absolutely. And I think it's sort of to the background. Our Capewell is owned by Argosy Growth Companies. And prior to Capewell, I worked at a private equity, Acorn Growth Companies as their COO. So as more and more private equity is purchasing manufacturing companies, you do get a significantly more higher level of attention to the financial side and really being able to drive both efficiencies, growth, and reduce costs and waste.
So when you think, listen, reducing costs and waste, lean manufacturing and making that happen, so absolutely important. I'm just curious from your perspective, taking this in a direction I hadn't really thought about, but it seems like there's always a balance, right? You want to squeeze as much, value, right, out of a business as you can, but at the same time, you got to produce something, and there's a balance there. Do you have thoughts about how to strike that balance between making sure we're investing in the future, investing in our people, and developing great products and building them, but also maximizing today's return? Like, how do you think about threading that needle?
Well, I think there's historically, people sometimes believe there's a mutually exclusive goal there. But I think by investing in your people and by investing in new technologies and having the most cutting edge, exciting, innovative, products, you accomplish both. You drive people's effectivity and the level of achievement by working in these different types of environments. So I don't think it's necessarily a trade-off. It's not back in the days where you was a function of, okay, well, we're just going to slash and burn and see what we can do. I think now what you do is I think you're seeing a lot more, at least at Capewell and other companies similar to us, a lot more paring down of our products that we supply, focusing much more on that sort of more narrow niche aperture of what we can do better than anyone else. And so if you think about your investment dollars, if it's focused completely on your mission, that narrow sort of vector that you're going down, you get a lot more better return on those unique dollars as opposed to spending a lot more in different directions and only returning on a shorter or on a smaller portfolio of solutions.
So focus on so if I was kind of re-say that in a different way, I think what we're really talking about here is focus.
Absolutely.
Laser focus. Like,
absolutely.
don't try and be the best at 15 things because you're going to end up being close to average. Try and figure out the 5 things you can crush it at, and then quadruple down, whatever, quintuple down on those 5 things. Drive maximum efficiency, drive maximum quality, invest in your people, your product, your equipment, everything to optimize those 5 products and just be number 1 in those 5 things.
Yeah, I mean, it's trite, right? We're all, I mean, back to the Jack Welch days. I mean, it was something that I really stuck with me. Be the best at what you do. And if you're not the best at what you do, just keep narrowing it till you are that best. And then once you become better there and you become the accepted best provider of X, then you can start expanding. But really sort of par that down as fast as you can and then expand at that point. Whether it's 1, 5, or 10, you have to be the best at what you do.
When you think about doing that, and this may be more broad than just about Capewell, but it's a super interesting conversation to me. So it is when you think about doing that, so you get to an organization and you look at it and you've got more than just those things you're great at. How do you recommend thinking about how to start paring it down? You know, like how to decide, well, to focus in on something, we have to say no to something else.
Right.
How do you think about a company should make those decisions? Like,
I mean, the obvious is obviously the financial. Right, you know, it's that sort of self-assessment. We're doing it right now. You know, Capewell is in some ways suffers from the tyranny of success. We've had 100+ years of just killing it, and the last probably 20, a little less investment in new stuff, and have done a lot of things for different people. But really, when you rack and stack your products and your services from a financial standpoint, you say, okay, what is our highest contribution, profit contribution? But more importantly, where is the area that we can be the best, recognized industry leader, and be self-aware? You know, if you're going to try to be, start a new company, and I know it's probably the wrong word like Tesla, but are you going to really want to try to compete against Ford with the exact same thing? You have to be different. Mm-hmm. So if you can't be differentiated and you know that you can't win, it's easier to pare down. As soon as you see someone saying we're a me too, and you realize that you're actually competing on cost, it's probably a product or a service you shouldn't be involved with.
I think that's actually a really smart lesson right there, right? Once you realize it's me too, and the only differentiator is cost, expand, change, do something different. Because down that path lies death. So I guess I have 2 questions. In Capewell, obviously you weren't around in 1881, but it's interesting, and I don't know how much you know about it, but if you think about it, it's such an interesting pivot, right? Because, you know, Capewell Horse Nail Factory, for people that have been in Connecticut, you know, for a long time, have heard of that. It was not very far from Colt, you know, as it turned out. And the company has such an amazing history. People may not know that it was one of the presidents of Capewell that actually built in the early 1900s. The governor's mansion was actually occupied by him or his family for about 40 years before it became the governor's mansion. I mean, this is a old storied company that started, you know, with making literally the nails that you put horseshoes on horses, which clearly that market isn't probably what it was in the late 19th century. So this company has pivoted to a thing that didn't even exist, right? If you think about it, when we started making horse nails, the idea of parachutes, the idea of airplanes wasn't even really anywhere. And I wonder, you know, do you know how the company, or maybe opine on, how does a company make that transition? Because that's just such an amazing thing to make a transition like that through so many different eras.
Well, a couple things. First of all, I think there's different types of people, and I don't know necessarily the psyche of a lot of my predecessors, but if you look in historically, there's those people that can actually are thoughtful leaders that know what the future looks like, create products, and then the market buys them. Or there's those companies like Capewell today and back then that said, we are solution providers. We're going to create an organization of really smart people, get really close to our customer, and understand what that problem is. So if you look at sort of the genesis from providing horseshoe nails for the cavalry, that was a problem solving, right? Mm-hmm. It was literally, hey, we have issues. Horses can only go so far. We need to shoe them. We need a lot of nails. We need an automated machine. Let's go from that. And that connectivity from our history in Connecticut with Colt was able to say this is a problem. Back in the 20s and 30s, you were having a lot of, as parachutes became more and more prevail as a delivery system, the people that were jumping out of them, as soon as they hit the ground in big gusts, they had no way to get rid of the parachute off and so you're having a lot of people getting hurt, what have you. Capewell said, okay, there's a problem. Let's figure out the situation. Let's figure out a solution and come up with a product that meets that or a service that meets that. Same sort of thing. We work with Chuck Yeager. It's bring us a problem. We've got really smart people. We'll dig in, lean forward, and come up with that solution. So I don't necessarily. I'd say it's being so close to a very small number of customers and being that sort of right-hand engineering or solution provider allows us to be in the conversation at first and then have that opportunity to solve the problem.
It's so important. I can't emphasize this enough. It's such a great lesson that I think business leaders need to learn, which is know that you're providing a solution to the customer. So you have to understand what the customer really needs. In quality, for people that may not know the story, I mean, Capewell horse nails were known the world over as the highest quality. And in fact, they're not made by Capewell anymore, but Cape under the name Capewell horse nails, they're still made today. And if you Google them, you'll read about that, how the quality was still there. So it's sort of talking about that idea of understanding your customer and the quality. And so it sounds like you guys are still doing the same thing, which is be close to the customer, still make that top-notch quality for the customer. It's just the customer doesn't need horse nails anymore.
Right.
They need, aerial delivery devices and quick release parachutes and what have you. What an amazing history. And I guess I wonder about this is maybe a more personal question, but how do you think about you personally taking on this like amazing legacy? Here's this 140-ish year old company that's just got this storied history, and just kind of stepping into these shoes. How do you think about that, and how do you think about kind of living up to that, or extending it, or don't you even think about it?
Oh, I think about it every day. It's amazingly humbling. One of the first, when I was first approached to, with the opportunity to come join the team, it was like, really? This is like, everyone's known who Capewell was. Literally people that then was jumped out of an aircraft. The Capewell release is the Kleenex of parachute releases.
It is, and I'm not maybe know people who don't parachute a lot know that, but people that know this industry or around it know the Capewell release. To your point, it is the Kleenex. It is the gold standard of parachute release. Yeah,
and to say that I'm humbled, and truly, it's not just a statement. I think about what the value that my predecessors have created, the legacy they've left, and really the impact on the kids that have served our country and allowing them to come home. It's heavy, and it's interesting. Even in the organization down in Southern Virginia, we're the largest employer in our county. You start understanding where you're more than just a company, you're more than just a solutions provider for the military, but you have responsibility to the community. And I think that, as we look at, and we spoke with the governor last week, is, how does Capewell be a better citizen, a better servant to the community here in Connecticut? Because it is so important. It is so critical to our mission's greater than just the very basic company.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So talk a little bit about that. You've taken over Capewell. Maybe some contours we talked about, which is, we still have an operation in Connecticut. It's in South Windsor now, not in downtown Hartford. Some operation in Virginia. Just talk a little bit about where you're going. What do you see the future of Capewell looking like now that you're taking over and investing? What does the future of Capewell in Connecticut and Capewell in general look like?
Well, specifically in Connecticut, both organizations is incredibly bright. We're from a positioning right now with regards to our near peer threat competition with Russia and China, the need to be able to deliver goods, services, et cetera, munitions out of transport aircraft is probably the number one. We're probably the number one organization in the world for that right now here in Connecticut. As we've moved our headquarters from Virginia to Connecticut to sort of return to our roots, is really to lever off of what the local business community has done here to attract the best and brightest of engineering talent. We were speaking last couple of days and with some of my colleagues that run companies in Boston. They said, hey, it's right up the road, but we can't get kids to stay here because it's so expensive. And when you look around basically, Connecticut's history, not just Capewell, but the Connecticut history, our sort of aviation alley right here, to be able to provide an ecosystem that draws from the schools, both Connecticut as well as the Boston schools and the Massachusetts schools, and develop a really just a really strong innovation-focused area. makes us want to invest even more here in Connecticut. And I would say the future here, as our center of excellence for airdrop and aerial delivery, is going to expand. We're looking at bringing on talent around robotics, artificial intelligence, machine vision, all the next generation of innovative solutions here. And then in Virginia, we're moving some of our technologies from Virginia up to Connecticut as well, to be able to support and be able to take advantage of the good workforce that we have here in Connecticut.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Let's talk a little bit about, I love that you're investing, here in Connecticut, and that you've seen what great ecosystem we have here with Aerospace Alley, Aerospace Component Manufacturers Association, all the great companies. I know many of them have welcomed you with open arms, and that's awesome. Really, really happy to hear that. You said something that's near and dear to my heart, which is leaning into technology. I am such a believer that manufacturers all over the U.S. and in Connecticut in particular, we were successful in the past by leaning into technology. If you even go back to the 1800s, it was new technology, what Colt and Capewell were doing, and we need to continue to lean into that new technology. And you've talked about some of it, right there with data analytics, artificial intelligence, data and leaning into that. Talk about your view of that and how important that technology is and leaning into it, and how Capewell is thinking about taking advantage of those technologies.
Well, exactly. A couple things. One, if you do an assessment of where we are, again, go vis-a-vis our near peer competitors, Russia and China, we're probably at the most, I'd say, aggressive point since the Cold War in terms of where we sit. We've got competitors that are dramatically investing in new technology. We all know what China's doing. We know what Russia's doing. Russia's, in some ways beating us in artificial intelligence. Obviously, we know what China's doing, et cetera. And the need to be able to quickly field technologies for the warfighter to be able to be effective against these threats requires technology, requires investments in technology. And such that, what we're looking at Capewell is how do we use, we've got 100 plus years of legacy tech. How do we utilize new tech, apply it to old tech? For example, if we're going to be delivering some level of payload, a traditional transport aircraft out of a C-130, and we can incorporate artificial intelligence in a guidance system, or if we say we need to drop this pad from here to deploy over there, and we need to use machine vision or computer vision to be able to identify in a GPS-denied environment, well, that's a smaller component of that entire system, but we're utilizing a lower cost transport platform versus a B1 or a B2 or something incredibly expensive. But strapping on that new tech, getting it out in the field really quickly, testing it, innovating, rolling the next rev, and working from that will be the way we'll be able to be competitive against Russia and China. Because quite frankly, their speed of tech delivery is vastly more than we are now. And so I think that if we are to be successful, we have to be a fast follower and even exceed their pace.
Is that something that you're looking at? The private sector needs to lean into that? Is that a public sector thing to sort of drive that, be a fast follower? Is it a combination?
I'd say it's definitely the private sector. I mean, you look at companies that are out there that are doing really innovative small tech out of even Silicon Valley or even Orange County. If you look at Anduril, some of these companies are just they're privately funded companies, but realizing that to get stuff out there to be effective with the government, that fast follower mentality just needs to be had, and they're being successful doing it.
Why do you think we've fallen behind?
I think that sort of, how do I describe this? I think there's a perception due to the success that we've had in the past that we truly are beyond the threats. And I think it's a real lack of understanding where we are vis-a-vis our peers that says, sort of ostrich, ignorance is bliss. We really are all we have to talk about is cyber. Look at your business. Look what's going on there. And these are just little bits of evidence that we're not as powerful as we are. And I think that for all of us that are trying to buy computers or what have you, we can't get chips. That sort of slowdown is sort of purposeful. And I think it's an awareness and awakening that maybe we aren't as well positioned as we need to, because we can't stop it. We're still paying ransoms for cyber, for ransomware, et cetera. And I would say that, people are starting to wake up. But I think that we as a country became very, how do I say, sort of drunk on the low cost products to be able to go through be able to get Chinese made products every day at Walmart, what have you, and just turn around and get new ones next week. I think it's that sort of acceptance for risk, vis-a-vis lower cost that has got us into trouble.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's in business too, right? Sometimes you're the market leader, you sort of lose sight of the competitor. Next thing you know, the person you thought could never catch you is ahead of you,
right?
Type of a thing. Do you see the connecting back to manufacturing on that same thought process? Do you see this kind of rejiggering and understanding of the world is going to lead to more reshoring of manufacturing, if not moving, some more chip manufacturing back to the U.S., at least start having more split manufacturing so we can control our destiny? Because, I mean, to your point about the chips, if they decided, if foreign countries who make chips for us decided to stop sending us new computer chips, that would be a huge problem.
Yeah, and I think that it's that awareness that we may have to pay a bit of a premium, but onshoring is absolutely critical. Also, I believe that it becomes I think Americans are uniquely positioned to like to compete. I think we've had these conversations before. And you look at whether it was World War II or FDR or the challenges with JFK, and you say to yourself, how do we, when we have an adversary, we don't want to lose. And I think that now with this awareness that we aren't necessarily number one, has brought on a sense of vigor across the entire ecosystem that people want to go win and fight and be better in tech, be better in manufacturing, accept the fact that we just can't provide the same sort of solution we've had for years. We need to come up with new, better ways to make things, develop things, design things, field things, and allow ourselves to fail. Fail fast. I know people say it often, but it really is critical.
Yeah, keep innovating, keep thinking. And listen, this isn't the first time that we've fallen behind and had to catch back up. The auto industry, I mean, we could think of a number of examples where, the space race you brought up is an example. I mean, we've sort of had that before. So I've got faith as well that we can kind of find our way forward. You touched on something that I don't get to talk about a lot on the show, but it's something that off the show I hear about all the time, which is the sort of the cyber threat. And I think, it's you sort of talked about that cyber threat coming from our geopolitical competitors. I think a lot of us have known instinctively and then through facts that have come out that a lot of the problems we have from cyber are probably strategic attacks from some of our competitors in the globe. But it isn't just on huge companies, it's on small manufacturers as well, and especially people with technology in the defense space. It'd be great for a competitor to get in and steal the latest generation best aerial delivery system from Capewell. So you must be thinking long and hard about how do you protect your intellectual property and your business from cyber threats.
Well, absolutely, and I think that it's a risk base. I mean, we can always go, we've talked earlier as well about going too much and too extreme, but the best practice is good workmanship and being able to understand that people are trying to take our data, and quite frankly, we don't have the funding like a Lockheed would have to harden down everything that we possibly do. So there is, the second layer of suppliers really is often the highest level of threat, or the recipient of the threats, because we just don't have the teams of people inside that say we're going to be able to man every gate and be able to provide for that defense.
Easier to break into Capewell than to Lockheed or the DoD.
Absolutely.
Right. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, so how do you, because you did talk about, listen, it's probably literally unlimited funds could be spent on security, cyber, and otherwise, but you got to have to make trade-offs because you want to be safe, but you also have to run a business. How do you think about balancing that?
I think, for me personally, and I've been involved, whether it's through AIA, Aerospace Industry Association, where we were tying in with their first NIST 800-171 compliance, is really understanding what that risk model needs to do. And I believe that if you have good hygiene and good practices, you can probably at least make yourself less of a target than others. And it's sort of I hate to say it, but it's be faster than your neighbor. So if they're going to go after someone, make sure it's not you.
You don't have to be the fastest gazelle, just not the slowest one.
Exactly. And I think that, being able to just sort of, the 80%, good hygiene, performance, and behavior, and training your staffs to understand what the various risks are, really will protect you from majority of the threats out there.
Yeah, man.
and being aware.
Absolutely. Awareness, follow some best practices.
Absolutely.
You can get a long way by just doing those things. I know we're going to be kind of running out of time here, but there's a few other things I definitely wanted to talk about. And I know it's a big organization, so I don't know how much detail you have on this, but I wonder your thoughts around recruiting and retention. There's a war on talent out there for any number of reasons. We all know about the Great Resignation and the challenges with working from home and COVID and daycare, and that not only is there a fight for talent in general, but for educated, engineering, highly technical talent, even more so. And I wonder what thoughts you might have about how to go about that recruiting and to retain the great talent that you do have.
Absolutely, and workforce is near and dear to my heart. I've spent the last decade focused on how do we really address this problem, the talent gap. I mean, not only is it this fight for talent, but you look at, especially in the aerospace and defense space, you've got, I don't know what percentage is, 80% of the engineers are going to retire within the next, call it 5 years or so. And so I think it behooves us to, as industry, to look internally and say, how do we create the environment that attract the best level of talent? And how do we create, people say, well, no one wants to come to the old stodgy aerospace. But guess what? When, Elon Musk has no problem attracting talent because they create really interesting problems, give challenges to the next generation of technical leaders, allow them to take ownership, allow them to fail. And I think that if you provide that type of business model, people will follow. And I think if you have the right company and you have the right sort of environment and culture where you give the people the opportunity to do really cool stuff, get out of their way, fail fast, have some ownership, I think it's less of a problem. But it's a mindset that we have to have that provides that opportunity for the new young talent to come in and be part of that.
Is it difficult, I guess, that on that same thread, because it's near and dear to my heart too, I see sort of two challenges, right? There's the one challenge, which is, the old stodgy aerospace. It's the perception war, right? Which is a little bit different. It's, it's not the new electric car. It's not, commercial space travel. It's not, internet search software, right? There's that perception. Interested in your thoughts on that. And then the second piece is you've got 140 years of company policy and culture that was built around a whole different ecosystem and different workforce. You got to change. Are those the two main challenges? Did I miss anything? And how do you think about conquering the challenges?
Well, I mean, those are definitely top challenges. But more importantly, I think that especially in the A&D space, you've had a significant push to risk avoidance and risk mitigation, which makes it less fun, right? We talk about it. It's
you don't get a chance to experiment and try new things because you're rewarded for not getting outside the box. Yeah.
Right, and kids just want to blow stuff up, and so I do think I go back to it. I think it behooves us to create interesting jobs, tough challenges, and one of the things that we've always done in my career that's been successful is getting as much connectivity to the customer, especially for the young technologists and engineers. I don't care whether you're driving a 5-axis machine or you're driving 3D CAD. Having the opportunity to engage with the end user, perhaps the customer, and then understand what their problems are and working hand on hand gives people an excitement. It sees purpose when they do. No one wants to work on the same cup for the last 15 years and do this and this. Hey, here's a new challenge. Let's go. And I think if you speed that sort of pace of play up and you give these more challenges, you create more challenges, it attracts the type of people that I think are going to make the next generation of technology even better.
Wow, that's really interesting because that's and that is going to be so critical, right? Because when you talk about data scientists and mechanical engineers and software engineers and digital digital design and all that, you are going to be fighting against Googles and Facebooks for the same exact people. So you got to find and create those environments. That's really interesting. And to bring it on, kind of maybe back to the first thing we had talked about is, when you narrow your focus and you narrow your aperture, it gives you the ability to invest more.
Right.
I would think. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, it for sure. And it allows you, if you're that premium supplier with the best talent, to work on the hardest problems. And I think everyone would agree that working on hard problems is a lot more fun than mundane, easy buttons to push.
And then just to kind of wrap it up, a couple last things. Just talk a little bit about we've touched on culture a little bit, and I think having the right culture, which we've sort of talked about, of experimentation and all that, is so important. How do you think about building that culture? You're new in the gig and trying to make sure you're leaning into the new culture. How do you think, and how would you recommend to other people that they go about building that type of a culture?
Well, I think it takes a village, right? And one of the things that really attracts me to this area in Hartford, and it was talking with Marty over at Stanley Black & Decker and the various other people in our Colin Cooper, and if we create an ecosystem here of excellence, innovation, and quite frankly excitement, I think it self creates, and you can create it within an organization. But I think if you can be more effective by creating it within a community, it becomes infectious. Those best practices share, the fast followers, how do we do this better than someone else? I think if you're open to whatever you need to do to create that environment and have that sort of open mindset, I think you'd be much more effective of creating itself. It's hard on a company by company specific. We all know the ups and downs of internal challenges, of culture challenges. But if you have a culture within a community that's reinforced by that, it becomes so much easier. And not only that, but it lasts a lot longer. It's a lot more endearing.
Is that why you've been investing your time, not just inside the walls of Capewell, but outside, developing a relationship with the community, engaging with the community, with other business leaders, government leaders? Is that why you're doing that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's both selfless and self-serving. I want to serve. I feel that, we ask a lot from the community that we're part of. And so you have to give whatever you can. But quite frankly, if we can create that destination of places to go where everyone wants to come be, work, and create great things, it just helps us all.
Absolutely, man. One of those rising tides lifting all the boats. Awesome. Listen, this has been great, Greg. I'm going to move to our rapid fire round of questions. You ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, here we go. Red Sox or Yankees?
Easy. Dodgers.
Starbucks or Dunkin'?
Starbucks.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Staycation or exotic destination?
Exotic destination for the weekend.
For the weekend. Sports car or SUV?
SUV.
If you had to do something other than be president and CEO of Capewell, it could be anything in the whole world, but had to be something different, what would you do?
I would love to play in the NBA, but push that aside.
That's a great answer.
Government service. I'd love to go work in the government.
Oh, look at that. So they're probably more likely to do that than the NBA, I would
Probably
say.
so.
Do you have a favorite business book?
Sun Tzu, Art of War.
Oh, that's a great one. What's one thing, Greg, that you learned early in your career, early in your life, that you think's propelled you to all the success that you've had?
Not just work hard, but work harder than your competitors. That's absolutely critical. And then the value of relationships, but not just self-serving relationships, but developing relationships where you can serve, whether they be in your community, your church, your government, association. That's been highly critical.
Work hard and serve others. What's something that you've learned later in your life, Greg, or later in your career, that if you could go back and tell young Greg, and young Greg would listen to you, you think would have helped him a lot?
I'm still trying to tell old Greg this, but it's patience. It's a journey. It's not just, and it's easy to get overwhelmed or excited about the shiny object of the day, but be patient and slow down and utilize that.
That's awesome, Greg. It has been so awesome having you on. So happy to have you at the helm of such a storied and great company, and look forward to watching you grow it.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by IT Direct, a CompassMSP company.
As always, thank you so much for tuning in and spending some time with me today. My goal is to help build a community where we can learn and grow together. Your input, feedback, and engagement is critical to making that happen. Please do comment, like, and subscribe so more and more people can hear what we're doing and join our community of growth and success. Thanks so much for tuning in. Talk to you again soon.